On the 1st of July, the Single European Act came into effect. Coming 30 years after the original Treaty of Rome that founded what was then the European Economic Community, this new act aimed to create a single economic market within the European Community, removing barriers to trading across borders to create a vast free trade zone which, it was hoped, would provide economic benefits to all members. The UK was a major player in framing the Act. The ruling Conservative Party were big fans of free trade and deregulation after all, and Lord Cockfield, Margaret Thatcher's appointee to the Commission, was largely responsible for its wording. The implementation was projected to take 5 years, with the new single market in place by the end of 1992. Canada introduced a new $1 coin, its first, featuring a common Canadian diving bird, the loon, so named for its distinctive call, which is a favourite of movie sound effects houses, used wherever an exotic, slightly eerie atmosphere is required. Naturally, the coin was almost immediately nicknamed the Loonie. 9 years later, when a $2 coin was introduced, it was naturally named the Toonie. The summer blockbuster season was in full swing, with Brian De Palma's The Untouchables riding high in the box office, and the second half of June saw the release of Predator, The Witches of Eastwick, Roxanne, and Spaceballs, with still to come Inner Space, Adventures in Babysitting, The Brave Little Toaster, Full Metal Jacket, RoboCop, La Bamba, The Lost Boys, Dirty Dancing, and the live-action Masters of the Universe movie. Also releasing that summer was the first movie with Timothy Dalton as James Bond, taking over from the long-serving Roger Moore. The Living Daylights saw a darker, moodier Bond, who notably remained monogamous and mostly pretty chaste. This was, after all, Bond for the AIDS era. And the BBC showed one of the most bizarre hours of television of the entire decade. Prince Andrew, having left his military service and keen to break into a career in TV, arranged for 4 celebrity teams, each led by a member of the royal family and each representing a chosen charity, to compete in a series of daft challenges in the grounds of the Alton Towers stately home and theme park. Among the frankly astonishing lineup of celebrities were Nigel Mansell and Jackie Stewart. Officially the Great Knockout Tournament, it was universally known as It's a Royal Knockout, after the slapstick game show It's a Knockout from the 60s and 70s, the British version of pan-European show Jeux sans frontières, whose format it borrowed. After 2 races in the narrow confines of street circuits, most of the field were happy to be stretching their legs on the long straights and sweeping corners of Paul Ricard. Though, of course, the power differential between the turbos and non-turbos would be much more keenly felt here, so the 3.5-litre cars would really struggle to make an impact. McLaren were hoping to go better here, the circuit suiting the chassis much better than Detroit and Monaco, while the Lotus and Ferrari teams had made some tweaks to the aerodynamics and reverted the changes to the engine they'd made for the street tracks. The Italian motor press, never the most patient when things weren't going well for Ferrari, were already putting John Barnard under pressure for the team's lack of success so far, but publicly the tone was all smiles, as Alboreto signed another 1-year contract extension, despite rumours putting him in a Williams for 1988.
No, I think for next year it's not possible to change, and Mr. Ferrari asked me to stay in the team even in the 88, so I decided already to stay with Ferrari even next year.
Yes. A lot of English fans were looking forward to you driving for Williams next year.
Yeah, I have a good friendship with Frank, but in this moment I think there is no the condition to change.
Fellow Italian Riccardo Patrese would make his 150th Grand Prix start in this, his 10th anniversary season, with John Baldwin now taking over the running of the Brabham team to allow owner Bernie Ecclestone to concentrate on his FISA duties. This 65th French Grand Prix would be the 11th held at Paul Ricard and the second in the shortened club configuration that had been introduced following Elio De Angelis' fatal accident last year. But the Mistral Straight was still plenty long enough, and the climate still hot and dusty enough to be a real car breaker, and the French Grand Prix would be the first of a trio of fast tracks, followed by Silverstone and Hockenheim. Practice was again dominated by an informed Nigel Mansell, who was fastest on both days to take his 5th pole in the 6th race of the year. But alongside him was Alain Prost, the McLaren indeed running much better here, to become the first non-Honda powered car on the front row since Mexico 1986. On row 2 were the Brazilian BFFs, Senna and Piquet, the former having blown an engine in the attempt, with former Arrows teammates Boutsen and Berger lining up behind them, and their current teammates Fabi and Alboreto behind them. Johansson again qualified badly in 9th, just ahead of Warwick, while Patrese would start his landmark race from a dispirited 12th, outqualified by his own teammate Andrea de Cesaris. Arnoux driving the much altered and 25 kilo lighter New Ligier was 13th, Nannini a fine 15th, and the non-turbo cars massively off the pace at the back, the fastest of them, Capelli's March, 6 seconds off pole and clocked at 50 kph, about 30 miles an hour, slower on the Mistral straight than Mansell's Williams. Pascal Fabre was the Lanterne Rouge once again, but would be hoping to repeat his usual slow but steady progress in the race. The grid lined up for the start, and immediately things went wrong for Ferrari. Alboreto clearly jumped the start, while directly in front of him Berger went nowhere at all. He got moving as the rest charged down to turn 1, Mansell still leading Prost, but Piquet having passed Senna, and the two Benettons now together, benefiting from Ferrari's misfortune. Unseen amongst the cars, De Cesaris ran over Johansson's nose, sending the unlucky Swede in for repairs. Piquet passed Prost for second at the end of the Mistral, while Eddie Cheever had another odd one, accidentally setting off the fire extinguisher in his car while trying to adjust the turbo boost. De Cesaris followed suit on lap 3 with a turbo failure, the marshals putting out the fire as Cheever's stricken arrows was wheeled into the picture behind. At the front, Mansell continued to lead from Piquet, the pair starting to pull out a bit of a lead from Prost as they lapped Nakajima, rolling back to the pits with a puncture after again getting into some trouble on the opening lap, and then lapping Johansson, who had managed to bend his new front wing as well and was on his way in for another. By lap 13 there'd been no change in the top 6, Mansell, Piquet, Prost, Senna, Boutsen and Fabi, with Patrese now up to 7th and Alboreto 8th, then Arnoux and Warwick, and Berger having made his way back up to 11th. Piquet was still pushing hard, keen to reassert himself over his theoretical number 2 driver Mansell, and before long Prost was with them too. Whether pushing too hard or momentarily losing concentration, Piquet locked up, flicked the back end round at turn 1 on lap 19, catching it before it became a spin and getting going again, but not before Prost had got through into second. Meanwhile, Patrese came in for the second time, ending his race in a rather anticlimactic fashion, with a busted differential, and Brundle had another nightmare of a pit stop after his fire in Detroit, this time an incorrectly fitted wheel parting company with the car shortly after leaving. While all that excitement was going on, Prost had caught back up to Mansell and was following closely, with Piquet a few car lengths back, and the Brazilian coming in for his first tyre stop on lap 30, running a 2-stop strategy for the race while Mansell was going for 1. He rejoined 5th between the two Benettons, which became 4th when Senna stopped next time around, then 3rd when Boutsen's engine gave up the ghost on the same lap. Prost kept pushing Mansell for another 3 laps, then came in himself, emerging just behind Piquet, who was about to lap Johansson just to confuse the viewers. Stefan got smartly out of the way to let both Piquet and Prost through, then on lap 35 of 80 Mansell was in, but his stop was slightly slower than Prost's. He re-emerged 3rd, but was soon challenging Prost on the start-finish straight, taking 2nd as they both lapped Nakajima again. Meanwhile, only about halfway into the race, the stewards had finally decided not to disqualify Alboreto for jumping the start, but to add 1 minute to his time at the end of the race and adjust his placing accordingly. So at half distance, the race order was Piquet, Mansell, Prost, Senna, Berger and Fabi, and Mansell was charging on his now optimal tyres, closing right up to Piquet and breaking the lap record before lunging through at the right-hander on lap 46, catching Nelson napping. Piquet stayed with Mansell, but couldn't make much of an impression, and although the pit boards for Mansell said tyres OK, Nelson decided to change his, coming in on lap 65, only for his engine to cut out while he was on the jacks. He was restarted and sent on his way after nearly 16 seconds stationary. A lapse in concentration and a stall, or an engine problem? Piquet insisted the latter. And Alboreto's penalty was rendered moot on the same lap when his engine broke. With fresh tyres and the bit between his teeth, Piquet charged back up to the rear of Prost as they both came round to lap Berger's 5th-placed Ferrari, Nelson setting a new fastest lap in the process. Prost, meanwhile, was having an intermittent electrical problem, causing a slight misfire, and Piquet had no problem breezing past as the McLaren stuttered slightly. As the laps ticked down towards the end, Piquet was still scorching round the track, taking lumps out of Mansell's lead, as Berger dropped back with suspension problems, promoting Johansson back into the points, at least until his alternator packed up 6 laps from the end. But Mansell still had plenty of go left in his Williams, and responded to Piquet's charge by speeding up and easing out the gap again, and took the win by 7 seconds in the end. Piquet was second for the 3rd race running, and Prost nursed his McLaren home 3rd. Senna had been pretty anonymous most of the day and finished 4th a lap down, with Fabi 5th and Philippe Streff taking the final point and winning the junior class, with Palmer following him home. Johansson was classified 8th, Pascal Fabre was 9th, and not last for once, because Satoru Nakajima finished unclassified and 9 laps down after a dismal day, having stopped for repairs 3 separate times. So there would be smiles at Williams and long faces pretty much everywhere else, except possibly at Tyrrell, who can't have expected to get a point out of this race, and several pundits pointed to what looked like an error-strewn race by Piquet and suggested it was maybe time for the double world champion to think about retiring. But nobody had time to think about anything much, because they needed to pack up and drive the 900 miles, about 1,500 kilometres or so, to Silverstone and set up again because the British Grand Prix was just 1 week away.